Jay Maisel, who's an amazing photographer, he talks about three components of photography: light, composition, and gesture. If you have those three components in any given photograph, you're going to end up with a great photograph. If you have one of those components, you might have a good photograph. If you have two of them, it might be okay. But when the stars line up and you have great lighting, great composition, and gesture, as far as it could be the expression of the person, it could be the frozen action of an animal, but just the way that the image is coming together makes that picture stand on three legs, so to speak. So we always, in the back of our minds as we're shooting, are constantly thinking, what is it how can we tweak this just a little bit to make it have that little extra oomph. Okay, Coy, so what we're going to start off with is kind of a scenario like you're getting ready, so as far as putting the wraps on.
Okay.
So we'll get you into position, we'll check the overall lighting, and then start to kind of go from there. So what we'll do is kind of run through the stages of preparation, then we'll get you probably doing some workout stuff, and then kind of a portrait, post-workout type of thing. So park yourself right about here. We'll work on these a little bit, but do you want me to shut that door?
It's
definitely look cold, yeah. Okay, there you go. Okay, so with the lighting we have in the room, you have the daylight coming in the window, and what I like to do is work with a light source as close to the model as possible. If you move her 10 feet that direction away from the wall, you're going to get a completely different quality of light, because that light source in relation to her is going to become much smaller. So I pushed her as close as I can to the window to get a nice big soft light source, which makes anybody look good. And then what I'm going to do is alter the fill side or the shadow side. So I'm either going to use a white panel to come in close to her and increase the contrast so it's more of a flat lighting ratio, or B, I'm going to flip that panel over to the black side and bring it in and really create a shadow, knocking out any ambience in the room on that side and creating a harder ratio. So with a couple simple lighting tools, you can really change the look of your photograph.
So if someone was trying this on a sunny day, they could use vellum, or they could use something else across some windows, and they would get almost exactly the same
absolutely
effect.
And if these windows have kind of this opaque glass on them, but if you're shooting at home, you can use a window that doesn't have direct sunlight coming in it and get the same kind of feel. Okay, that looks great, Coyle. Try a couple more here. Go ahead and scoot back on that bench just a touch. Good. Okay, and then lean forward again like you were. Nice. I would say the biggest mistake I see people first starting to take pictures doing is putting everything into the center of the frame. It's a natural thing to do when you first start taking pictures. That's typically where the focal point is, set up for autofocus. You set your subject in the middle of the frame and you snap away. Well, that can work depending on the picture you're taking, but oftentimes you want to have some tension in your photographs. You want to have some negative space. So, the basic rule in photography is called the rule of thirds. And basically, if you took a line and you drew it, down 1/3 into your frame, another third down to your frame vertically, and then also horizontally, so you broke your viewfinder into 9 segments. And you tried to compose either on the vertical line or the horizontal line, either way, for your horizon or your subject matter, you're immediately going to start to see that you're going to improve, the way that you're taking pictures, because you're putting things off balance.
I've looked at your website, I've looked at the work that you've published. It's really kind of remarkable to me, the way that you're able to draw a gesture out of people?
There's two different approaches to photography. The shoot that we did today, a stock photography setup, we're blazing through that. It's about content, it's about numbers. I'm not necessarily concerned that every frame is completely perfect, because honestly it's a volume thing. I need to try to maximize my investment for that shoot. So I am shooting a lot. A lot of the portraits that you've seen, were all done on large format film. And that's not the case. You're not hammering down a motor drive and just, shooting 600 pictures and hoping you get a good one. But, that process is far more methodical, set up, and specifically kind of moving the person to exactly where you want them, telling them not to move, and then taking the picture. And I think that my background shooting large format portraits really helped me make pictures rather than take pictures. And today, was more of kind of a combination of both. I'm making pictures because I have to think of the composition, set up the models. I'm acting as my own art director. So I'm, kind of doing both those things, but a little more from the hip, taking pictures. Let's shoot this, let's try this. And, somewhere in there's going to be a handful of good shots. I know that. With the portrait work, originally when I started, when I was young, I would go into a situation. I was, 21 years old. I'd get a job to photograph a professional baseball, football player, boxer, and I wanted to make the experience different. So I was shooting large format 4x5 film, and just by having that camera there gave me a presence of, within the person's eyes of, this is something different. This guy just isn't someone here with a 35 millimeter camera that, pretty much anybody thinks they could pick up and shoot with. But the tool itself did two things. One, it established credibility, like, hey, there's something different going on here. And two was, it forced me to make the picture. I had to, stare Lance Armstrong in the face and say, sit there, don't move, turn your head this way, lock yourself in, stare in the lens, and then snap. And I think that a lot of my portrait work has that feel to it, because you have to direct the shoot, you have to take control. And I found that even, shooting more digital and more 35 millimeter than I ever have the last few years, has my, a little bit of my style has changed, because you can dance around a little bit, and it's, it's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, it's just, a different process.
Yeah, well, let's translate that to people that are trying to shoot people for the first time.
Sure.
They've got a digital SLR.
I think that every person, when you first get into photography, is intimidated about photographing people out on the street. It's a little bit of an invasion of privacy. You feel like, wow, there's an interesting person I'd like to photograph, but I don't necessarily want to go up and get in their face and take their picture or talk to them, so I'll stand across the street and shoot it with a zoom lens. I remember doing that. Always, when I was in college, I very rarely shot people. I was very intimidated by it. But, I've learned through, just approaching people and, just asking permission, can I take a picture of you? One is you develop a rapport with that person, and they're going to do two things. They're either going to say sure, or they're going to say no. If they say no, no problem. But what it allows you to do is, when you interact with someone, is get a sense of who they are. And I've had amazing experiences of just stopping people on the street and saying, I'm a photographer and I'd love to take a picture of you. I'm working on a story about locals in the area, and oftentimes people are absolutely whatever you need. And one, you get to meet amazing people that otherwise how many people do you see every day that go, well, I wonder what that guy's story is? A camera allows you access to places that most people never get to go. And if you use it as a key, it can unlock doors to amazing experiences that, most people don't have an excuse to stop and say, hey, can I take your picture? What's your name? Tell me about yourself, So I think that you have to break down that wall, and it just takes time to do it. But, don't be afraid to get close and, get intimate with people. And I think that, when you're learning photography, again, it's like, whoa, back up. I bought my mom a digital camera for Christmas, a little Canon elf. And, she's never had a digital camera, and, I've shown her how it worked, and, she's like way back and, taking a picture, and we're in the center of the frame, me and my son, and there's all this room all over the place. It has nothing to do with what she's taking a picture of. She wants a picture of us. And I said, Mom, come in close. And she kind of took one step in. I was like, no, closer. Fill the frame with our heads, you know, and she like got in close. And it was like she took it in stages. But once she saw that image come up, when she was, you know, closer to us, it was like the light bulb, you know, kicked on for her. Like, oh, okay, that's what I'm taking a picture of. So, you know, oftentimes if it's not interesting enough, you're not close enough. So, you know, that'd be, you know, another piece of advice I give, you know, new photographers. Get close. If someone's looking at you from the side and they're thinking, what is that person taking a picture of? Chances are you're taking a good picture because you're seeing something that they're not. And, you know, that's really the trick with photography is everybody sees the world differently. Take your own perspective, put your own spin on it, and, you know, discover your world through, you know, photography. I think with all the, you know, the new cameras, the Nikons, that there's so many functions and so many different buttons and modes and settings that oftentimes people, especially when they're first getting into photography, get so overwhelmed with all of the technological stuff that they kind of lose sight that it's really the person behind the camera, you know, that really makes a difference. A camera is a box. It's like a guitar. You hand it to 3 different people and you're going to get 3 different types of music, and depending on the person playing it, so to speak, is, you know, going to dictate the music that you make with it. So, you know, for, you know, Nikon users, I think it's important that you know the technology, but you don't just get so caught up in all the, you know, bells and whistles of the camera that you lose sight of what it is that you're ultimately trying to do, which is see through the camera and take good pictures. And you have to, you know, get to a point where you feel, you know, what you're supposed to be taking, and, you know, the playing the chords becomes, you know, secondary. The biggest problem you run into when you first start shooting is going out into the, you know, harsh sun in the middle of the day where you have high contrast range, and the best photographer in the world without some sort of light manipulation, you know, is not going to be able to do anything with that. You know, I could go out there and, you know, if I have, you know, a bounce card to fill a little bit of light into the shadows, maybe that's going to help. But, you know, you're stuck with Mother Nature when you're outside. So you either have to take your subject to an area where you don't have that light. You could shoot on an overcast day. A lot of people, for me in San Diego, will look at me and say, oh, bummer, you had a photo shoot today, it was cloudy. I was like, actually, that's fantastic for me because I didn't have to run around with a giant panel over the set all day and, you know, have 2 assistants hold it down in the wind. You know, that was Mother Nature giving me a nice big soft light source without, you know, huge contrast. Open shade, which would just be like a covered awning. It could be a patio. Anywhere where there's just nice soft light, bounce light from the sun coming in to that space, you're going to get a nice soft light on the person's face, and immediately you're going to see, you know, good results. Drop your right hand down to your leg. Yeah, back just a little bit. Good, right there. Perfect, just like that. And Luis, let's go ahead and grab that panel, and when I tell you to, you're going to walk in, you're going to do a white and then a black. Okay. Oh, it's fine. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of a white fill here. Luis, back the corner of the frame out. Go, go, go. What I have him do is bring that in all the way into frame, just so you can see it, and then back it out so it's as big as it can be in the frame. Great. Right there, roll your head this way just a little bit. Good. Right there. Okay, Luis. Koya, you hold really still. Flip it over to black, Luis. Good. Holding still right there, Koya. Good. Back out just a little bit. Great. Right there. Okay, relax. Most digital cameras these days are going to have 3 metering modes. You're going to have a spot mode, a center weighted mode, and a matrix mode. Okay, if you don't want to worry about the technical side of photography, put your camera in matrix mode, let the camera average, you know, everything in there, and it's going to come up with its best guess of what your exposure should be. Your meter in your camera is a reflective meter. You're going to hear the terms in photography, incident and reflective. Reflective is light bouncing off of the subject matter, and it's interpolating that information and basically trying to make it a hypothetical 18% gray, which is a photo term. Okay, great lesson for you to understand how this works. Go outside, put your camera in autopilot mode, either program or aperture priority. Go and shoot a white wall. Fill your frame with a white wall. You can be 3 feet away from it. Take a picture. Look at that picture. That wall is going to be gray. Go over to something that's completely black. It could be a black shirt. It could be a black wall. Take a picture of it. It's going to be 18% gray. So basically, your meter is trying to make everything it sees an 18% tonal value. And out in nature and in life, most things can be averaged into that equation, and unless you're in a really crazy lighting situation, it's going to be fine. If you've ever gone out and taken pictures in the snow, and you get your pictures back and everything looks a little bit muddy, that's because it took all that white snow and everything in there, tried to make it 18% gray. Spot metering is going to take a little tiny spot in the middle of that frame, and you're going to be able to point that at something and meter off of it. So you might be able to look at something in your frame and say, that's roughly 18%. You can point that spot meter at it and take a meter reading, adjust your exposure for that one point, and then everything else should fall into place.
So you're not talking about the color, you're not talking about the saturation, you're talking about what?
A gray card is exactly this. It's, this is 18% gray. This is what your reflective camera meter is trying to calculate. It's trying to make a white wall 18% gray. It's trying to make a black wall 18% gray. It's trying to take a forest and make it an 18% tonality. People get thrown for a curve when they hear that 18% gray term because they don't get it. It's like, well, this is a color picture, it's not gray. Well, it's an average of all these things for an 18% tonal value. So that's what your meter is trying to do. A meter is your measuring stick in commercial photography. It's like trying to build a house without a yardstick. You can do it, but it's not going to look that good when it's all over. So that handheld instant meter, I know people ask me all the time, do I really need one of those? Those things are expensive. Well, if you want to take your photography to the next level, you want to light things, it's a must.
I think I get it. I think I understand what an 18% gray card is, but I've got my wife standing under a street light and I want to take her photograph. And I've got spot metering on. What am I going to point at? What's an 18% gray?
Well, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find something that has a similar tone to this in the frame.
So similar lightness or darkness.
Right, exactly. So, the shirt you're wearing, it's pretty good, pretty close.
Pretty good.
So, if I was,
And your shirt?
Mine,
A little dark.
a little dark.
Your nose?
My shoes,
Little light.
my hair,
No.
no. But, you learn these things over time, but basically, a gray card is just a simple way to show this is what your camera's trying to think. So if you go out and do that little lesson of shooting a white wall and a black wall and seeing that it's making them both gray, you can understand in a situation where it's super bright, you might want to overexpose a little bit. You might want to, manually override. And in your viewfinder, you've got the little plus and minus, and you're always like, I need to be dead center, and you make your adjustments to be there. Well, there's times when you need to be, at the plus side, and times you need to be at the minus side.
You've been kind enough to pull a bunch of things from your library. Let's take these things apart. What are the elements of composition that make it work or don't make it work? What are the rules that you're using to make the particular photo? What's the gesture? What's the light? And if you did modify the light, what is it that you did? So tell me about taking this photo.
Sure. This picture was taken at the Denver Grand Prix, and there was a demonstration of freestyle motocross riders. This particular shot was done where the bikes are flying over the top. It was a really cloudy day. The sun is peeking through, and I'm thinking, well, how can I get this guy to the sun to blast right through where he's at? So again, it's backlit. One of the rules in photography, never backlight. It's completely backlit. I took my meter reading and I underexposed just a little bit to darken up the clouds. So again, I didn't do what the camera was telling me. I had to overthink what the camera was telling me, that 18% value. If I exposed for that, it would be brighter based on what the camera was telling me. And then put it into high speed motor drive and just let it rip from the time that guy came off the jump all the way through. And I just kept panning with him and shooting until I got a guy in the right spot. But I had to adjust my position based on the first couple riders that came through to make sure the arc of where they were going to cross the sunlight was at the right spot. This guy's right on this third edge of the frame, and it gives you a sense of where is this guy? Where did he come from? Where is he going? And there's a sense of man, he's doing a handstand. What's going on?
So how did you get this image?
This picture was taken at the LA Coliseum during a Supercross event of Jeremy McGrath when he was #1 motocross rider. And we talked about leading lines, and we talked about light. In backlit, this is a heavily backlit small light source at the end of this tunnel, and way overexposed from what the meter is telling you that picture should be. But there's a little silhouette, there's a mystery of who is this guy, where is he going, and the sense of the light opening at the end of the tunnel. And then with the way it's composed, again, instead of putting him just straight in the middle of the frame, I've justified it over to one side and left that negative space on the left, which is great for copy, for an ad, for the opening of a magazine spread, for all the words, but also the lines at the bottom of the page that kind of take you in. So when you look at that picture, it's boom, you go straight to him. With the picture of the guy on the motorcycle flying in the air, boom, you look at him. Your eye is drawn to that. So I specifically composed the image and worked with the lighting that was there to draw your attention to what I want you to look at.
But using very classic painterly concepts of the leading line, diagonals, using all of the things that make the eye of the viewer into the photograph and into the third dimension. Really, really a great photo.
I think studying painting, the masters, old paintings, is a great way to understand light. And those people, how they made those paintings at that time is amazing to me. The catch lights in the eyes and the reflections in glass is phenomenal at a time with the tools that they had. I did an art night at my son's school a few weeks ago, and it was we did the chalk painting on construction paper. And at the end of the night, it's like a vase with flowers, and one of the guys came over and was like, "Whoa, who did that?" He's like, you must be an artist, because I had this vase and I had a nice highlight down the side and a shadow. But that's all just stuff I've learned through photography. I'm a horrible artist and a terrible painter. That's why I became a photographer, because I can't do that stuff. But the ability to understand that you can take a white piece of chalk on a dark vase and run a line down, and it makes it look like a highlight from the sun, and then take a dark piece of chalk next to it and on the opposite side and make a shadow, and that's nothing different than what we do in photography.
Right. Now tell me about this. I know that you shoot down in Baja all the time.
When I got out of photography school, one of the first accounts I fortunately got was shooting for Toyota Motorsports, and I did a lot of off-road photography with Ivan Stewart and their desert racing team. And there's no bigger thrill for me as a photographer than hanging out the side of a helicopter and chasing a race car through the desert. And this particular shot is an example of when a slower shutter speed works. This picture was taken at probably a 30th of a second, but the rate that I'm moving is the same as the race car. And when you lock that focus in and shoot, you get this sense of flying down the road. If I took that same picture with a fast shutter speed, it would not have any of the impact. And this is one of my favorite action shots that I've done.
Now this is interesting.
So this particular picture is taken at the starting line. For every sport, there's nuances that people that know that sport are going to be more in tune with than people outside of it. This is shooting way past the starting grid of all the motocross racers. Jeremy was #1 at the time, which if you win the championship, you get to wear #1. That's basically the numbers that they wear are ranking. So here you can see his numbers out of focus, his name's out of focus, but yet for anyone that knows that sport at that time, you know it's him because you can make it out enough. But it's looking, I'm focused way down the grid to where the starter board is, and that's, you know, like a countdown clock. So they do 60, 30, and then they drop it and go, and then everybody, you know, takes off from the starting gate and charges down. So again, I've composed the picture to one side, so there's a balance in thirds. You've got Jeremy over on this third, and then the starter over on this third. And you know that, here's an example of, instead of the subject being in focus and the background being blown out, the background is in focus and the foreground is blown out of focus. And that's what gives your images depth.
Now here's something that someone who looked at this the first time, if I were to look at this, I'd say the horizon on this particular photo is right in the center, which people have told me in the past I don't want to do.
Typically the strongest line, you know, horizontally across your image is, you know, is your horizon, and it is, you know, better. Again, look at, you know, old paintings and you see the vase on the table and the table's down here. You look at great photography and it, you know, the horizon's here, or it's typically, you know, up top. But here the strongest line, the horizon line, is actually kind of covered by all the stuff, and the strongest, you know, horizontal line in the photograph is, you know, that line at the top of the frame, which is, you know, at the top third.
Terrific. Let's look at another one. I got to ask you where you were. Were you in a helicopter when you shot?
So this is another helicopter shot, you know, 15 years after I took the other shot of Ivan Stewart at the Baja 1000. And I think that the contrast between these two images, again, for storytelling, I always try to shoot, you know, wide angle pictures and telephoto pictures of the same thing to help that, you know, intimate photo, and then, whoa, what's the surroundings? Where is, you know, this taking place? In this picture, you know, when these guys are racing down the roads in Baja, they kick up tons of dust. But, you know, again, I just tried to compose the shot so the horizon is down at the bottom third of the frame. You've got the mountains kind of in the center third, and then you got the sky at the top third, and then you've got this trail of dust creating the S curve, you know, that pulls your eye, you know, into the frame and creates a, you know, graphic element within the composition. You know, with that shot used with a nice tight shot of the race car, and you put those things together and give that to a client at a magazine or for an ad, they've got a lot of different elements to work with to tell the story. Here's the car, this is what it looks like, this is the speed of it, and boom, here's where this car is racing out in the middle of nowhere.
That's amazing. Okay, let's look at one more. So before we jump into who this is and what exactly you were trying to accomplish, what did you see when you looked down the stock?
Well, this was an early morning shot for Centurion Boats, which is one of my clients, and we were shooting some ads and a brochure for them. And we, you know, got up before sunrise, but we had scouted this location the day before, and I think that's something that people that look at, you know, work of Annie Leibovitz and Bruce Weber and David LaChapelle, you know, these people who are leading the industry in photography right now, these people just don't show up with a camera and point and shoot the majority of the time. These locations are scouted. They know exactly where the sun's going to come up, what time of day the sun's going to come up. We planned the shot, you know, 48 hours before it happened. We said, okay, you know, here's a compass. This is where the sun's going to come up. Here's the dock. These will be great leading lines. We can park the boat in the background over here. You know, we can compose it so the horizon's at the bottom third of the frame, and, you know, we can put, you know, Adam in the center of the frame here, and we can light him from the side. So again, this is something you're seeing that the human eye wouldn't see.
Yes.
This picture doesn't exist
in nature.
In nature, it, you know, it only exists photographically. The picture of him, if I didn't have the flash going on, he'd be a complete silhouette. But we've brought that big strobe in, a large softbox, just out of frame. I always walk the softbox just in, close, close, close. And as soon as I see it, I tell the assistant, back it out. Boom, right there. It's that big, soft, portable window just off to the side. It's balanced, so the exposure of the strobe is, you know, matching the ambience of outside. And in this case, you've got the sun just peeking past the mountains, raking across that wood, giving all that nice texture. The transition from the sky of the sun coming up to the nice blue area, and it's perfect negative space for the advertising agency to put copy in, and sell their product.
Did you shoot that in manual mode?
Yes.
Okay, and you underexposed it.
The majority of my outdoor portraits, this is the formula that I use. It's worked for years, and it's going to continue to work. It's a good look. It makes people look nice. Big soft light source outside. Take a meter reading of the sky and underexpose it just a little bit. Super blue, rich tones. Dark, moody clouds if it happens to be an overcast day. Bring the light in, light the person up. A little bit of contrast, so you don't have a flat lit person. And it works time and time again.
And people who are looking at this at home right now and they're saying, I can't do this. I've seen you do it.
Sure, you can get a flash fill look like this with an on-camera flash, or put it off camera just a little bit so you don't have that straight on light. Yeah. Or if you do want to get a softer light like this, if you do have someone, take your off-camera speed light and pop it up against a board, a white board, and all of a sudden you've got a light source that instead of being this big, which is the size of your speed light opening, you've got one that's that big. So there's ways to do this. Is it easy? No. But what level of effort do you want to put in? This this is what I like to do. This is the look that I like to have to my work, and it takes work. This was taken with a 40 millimeter lens on a Hasselblad. And one of the things as I've moved into digital 35 millimeter photography that I've had to change is a little bit of the feel of shooting with medium format. I can't quite reproduce this look and feel that I've done over and over again with lots of different subject matters that 40 millimeter on a medium format camera gives me. And there's certain times when I just go back to shooting film for that specific look, and this is one of those cases. So I chose to shoot with a wide lens, down low, giving this person this sense of looking up at him, kind of a superhero. This was shot for a personal assignment on a trip to Cuba, and it was one of those things, like I like sports. I photographed boxing for assignments and professionally. It's part of the culture there, and I found a gym and I went and did this as a personal assignment, and this ended up turning into a national ad that someone saw this picture and purchased it. So I think you have to, again, put yourself into your photography. What is it that you're passionate about? What are you interested in? And help put yourself into those venues, because you're going to get better pictures that are going to be unique and are going to have a lot more of you in them if you're shooting something you love and you enjoy and you're passionate about.
Again, I got to get technical on you just a little bit. You're talking about 40 millimeters on a medium format lens, and for people that have just moved into 35 millimeter or a crop factor of 1.6, and they're struggling with what does this mean compared to what does that mean. 40 millimeters on a medium format is wider than 40 millimeters on a 35 millimeter.
Correct. Say I wanted to get this similar look, which I do with 35 digital, is I'll shoot with maybe like a 28 millimeter. The thing you don't get, because it's not a square format, is that extra sense of space on the sides, because you're into a rectangular format.
You talk about gesture, and here's a situation where the kid's giving you everything, but what I really love is that you're using the technology to elicit the gesture as well. You're using the wide lens, which is going to stretch everything out and foreshorten that boxing glove to give gesture to the child.
Sure. The thing with this shot is the lighting isn't as apparent as it is in some of my other work. I happened to light this because I had the equipment there, but I think I could have gotten just as a dramatic shot with available light. It was kind of an overcast day, and it was just nice, soft lighting. The wide lens is forcing those gloves to be really big, and the rest was up to this kid. I walked into the gym, looked around, and I saw this guy, and he was the shortest kid in there, but he just had the biggest spirit. And we talked about approaching strangers. Here I am in a foreign country. I don't speak the language, and I basically went over and said, to somebody, hey, camera, I want to take a picture of him. pointing, and my Spanish is terrible, but that was the basics of it. And his father was there, and basically stumbled through explaining to him, hey, I'm a photographer, and I'd like to take a portrait of your son. I'll send you a picture, and it went from there. And this is one of my personal favorite shots, and one of I think the things I'll look back on in my life and go, wow, this picture is, I love the impact of it, I love the story of it, but it also, the experience of being there and going there, it brings all those elements together. Well, I think one of the things that when someone buys a new camera, they equate the expense of the camera to the quality of the pictures that they're going to get. That's true to a degree if you're using the camera properly. The camera isn't taking the pictures, it's the person behind the camera operating it, which ultimately is controlling the lighting, the composition, and making the choices of what the photo is going to be about. So I think that the first thing when people get these cameras is they just think they're going to point and shoot and get these phenomenal photographs. And there's a lot to learn, especially with a high-end or a medium-end digital SLR. I think buying equipment in photography, do you need a lot of equipment to take great pictures? No, you can take great pictures with one camera and one lens. But if you're going to try to expand your business and you're going to try to do commercial work, you may, need to have a long lens and a short lens. And for me, my advice is buy the equipment that you can afford. Some of the equipment I have is more of a luxury, like, hey, this is kind of a cool toy to have that I can use every once in a while. But initially, I would say only buy the stuff that you have to have, and then make sure you have a backup of your camera body, because if you get into a situation where you're being hired, you can't afford to not have that insurance policy. And as far as different lighting and grip equipment, it's an individual thing. Some people are really into all the bells and whistles and love having all the gadgets, and if that's your thing, that's great. Initially you might be able to make some of those tools, so you don't have to spend a lot of money, but as time progresses, it's nice to have professional equipment that's durable and reliable for when you need it. So when you're shopping for lenses, you'll see that you'll find a lens that'll be f5.6 that's $250, and all of a sudden you look at a lens that's 2.8 and it's $2,000. And everyone says, well, what's the difference? Why would I pay that kind of money? Well, it's a huge difference because the lens is that much faster, the depth of field is more shallow, and you can really separate your subject from the background down at 2.8 that you're not going to get with a 5.6 lens.
Even though you had Luis go in with a great big fill, a great big panel that was black or white, a person could really get away with something that would be as cheap as a piece of foam core.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can either use if you want something a little more specular, you can get the silver insulation boards from a hardware store. You can cover a board with foil, you can use foam core. Really, you just want something that's decent size. You can use a bed sheet.
One of the things that kind of surprises me is, for you, equipment is not very important. I mean, I see you shoot with Canon, I see you shoot with Nikon, I see you shoot with flash, I see you shoot with strobes. It's really the ability to see.
Yeah, and I love all kinds of shooting with all kinds of cameras, and the guys at the studio always laugh at me because the eBay box will come in and they'll be like, oh, what'd Tim buy now? And I mean, I'll buy, old 4x5 cameras, I'll buy, disposable kids cameras, I'll make my own cameras, I'll do pinhole photography, I've milled out lens caps and glued other lenses from other, cameras or from the hardware store, the little things you stick in the door to see who's knocking on there, and tried all kinds of stuff. But I love the process of photography, and each camera is a different tool. It's going to give you a different look, whether it's a Nikon or a camera 35mm. Every camera has a little bit different feel of it. In the end, they're all pieces of equipment, it's how you use it. And, that's what I think is fun about photography is, your first digital SLR is really just the tip of the iceberg, and, what you can do and how to explore with that. There's the lens babies now that, is basically some guy made with a hose and a little plastic lens that moves, and you can take some amazingly interesting shots, with a really low-tech piece of equipment. But again, it's the feeling that particular lens gives to your image that's different. It's what the human eye can't see. And I think that with a lot of my work, I think people are drawn to it because it's surreal in a sense. The relationship of a person standing outside with this blue sky behind them, which is I'm underexposing a little bit from my meter reading, and then bringing this flash in to light them, the combination of those two elements you and I can't see with the eye. It only can be done through photography.
What's really amazing to me is how easy most of these manufacturers have made the flash system. You can turn it on full auto and let the thing do a fill flash, and it will do a wonderful job, much better than the photograph would be without it. You don't have to do any work.
When we first started taking pictures, everything was manual, and you had to really think about, what's my f-stop, my shutter speed, what's the flash at, and you had to really think about that. Now with the technology, you're free to take pictures. I oftentimes will put my camera in aperture priority, depending on what I'm shooting. If I know, I kind of want a shallow depth of field, and just go shoot. I don't ever think about, I let the camera do the thinking, if it's not a tricky lighting situation. Let the camera do that for you. I think it's important to learn about your camera and understand how when your meter is going to get tricked. But, I think for the most part, when you're first starting, learn how to see. And I think that, I forget what photographer it was that said, I can teach someone everything about photography except for how to see. And it's true. And it's a hard thing to explain when, you ask me about how do I pull this, these emotions out of these people. I can't necessarily teach that. I can't explain it. It just, is what makes each one of us different in our own photography. And I think that's the key is, don't take pictures like me, take pictures like you. That's what really is going to separate, you from everybody else. And in the end, this is about your vision and your perspective on the world, which it should be. So,
and your life.
Yeah, embrace your unique perspective. Embrace the way that you want to do things. You may say, I don't have any interest in lighting portraits and doing any of that. I love from the hip photojournalism, available light, and more power to you. That's great. But if you are looking at things and saying, hey, I'd like to do more, setup shots, then start with the basics. With a very limited budget and basic tools, you can do a ton. The light's been kind of changing in and out throughout the day, so right now the sun kind of popped through. It looks like the clouds cleared up outside, so we're just taking advantage of the great light coming through the windows. Okay. You're happy though. Looks great. Keep it rolling.
So Tim, we're getting a little bit later in the day here. The sun's going down, the color temperature is changing. Do you care at this point?
I'm on auto white balance. Now with, if I was shooting transparency film a few years ago, definitely would have been a major concern. Right now I'm in the ballpark, and any adjustments I need to make I can do when I convert the raw files in Photoshop. I've got a gray card that we put in for white balance at the beginning of every shot, so we can adjust all the files at one time off of that. Okay, so a couple things. I'm going to use this flex fill reflector. This is a nice setup because you can use this as either a bounce fill, backlight, and bounce a little bit light into the subject matter, or if you look through it, you get a nice diffusion and you can get nice soft light on your subject going through it. So it works both ways. You know, in the wind here, it's a little bit, you know, hard to control, but I'll just use a tripod often just to lean it up against and you know, use that as a little camera stand. The other thing you do is this Nikon Speedlight has a hot shoe adjuster on it. This Nikon Speedlight has a hot shoe mount, and where you normally mount your camera, you just mount your Speedlight and you have a light stand. And what I'll do when I'm using the Nikon setup is I'll adjust the infrared sensor so it's aiming to the camera and then twist the head so it's going towards the light. I can pop this up, and I've got a little softbox portable for outdoors, and it's wireless, so it's a really nice setup. Okay, Lucas, I'm going to do a picture of you, bud. All right, pal, walk over this way just a little bit. Stop right there. Good, just like that. Good job, bud. Then what I'm going to actually do is block the sun off from him by using his body to shield the sun from coming straight in the lens. Turn that way just a little bit, bud. Good. Come to me just a touch, bud. Step up, 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 up. Stop. Good, just like that. Go ahead and drop your glove down. Put it on your hand. Yep. You're doing great, bud. Go ahead and kneel on one knee, pal. There you go, just like that. Perfect. And now turn that way just a little bit. Just a smidge. There you go. Whoop. Sit back up. Tall on one knee. There you go. Turn this way just a little bit, bud. Okay, turn this foot. Sit up on one knee now. Sit up there. There you go. Put this here. Lean out this way. Good. Sit up tall, bud. There you go. Just like that. Good. There you go. Can you sit on that knee? Perfect. Good. Just like that. Looking right here. Okay, so I'm going to dial up the shutter speed to underexpose the sun just a little bit. So I'm going to go to, I'm at ISO 200, I'm going to go to ISO 100, and I'm going to set the camera at 200th of a second at f14. I'm going to just do a quick meter reading of the sky, which right now is giving me about that's about properly exposed. If I point this right at the sky, so that's just going to give me a nice blue. And then I'm going to underexpose it just a little bit, so I'm going to go to f16, 18, f22. If I meter the sky, that's an underexposure of about a stop. Okay, Luke, looking right here, pal. Good. Good. That looks good. Okay, bud, turn that way just a little bit. Same position. Here, let me get you into a spot. Sit just like this, bud. Okay, so your leg's going to face like that. So put this knee up in the air. And then kneel on this knee. Perfect. And then this foot's going to go right there. Good? Okay, perfect. You're doing great, bud. That's perfect. Good, just like that. Scoot this way. You're doing fine, pal. Perfect, just like that. Good, good, good. Gonna use your head to block the sun a little. Good, a little smile. 1, 2, and 3. Good, turn your nose that way just a little bit, bud. Good. Eyes here. Good, just like that. Doing great. Sit up a little taller there, bud. Almost done. Good. Doing great. Big smile. Okay, so it's just a little bit underexposed for my liking on Lucas, so I'm going to go ahead and use the commander mode on the camera, which is dialing up the strobe 1 stop. Perfect, pal, right there. That looks good. Just like that. Good. Sit up tall and scoot that way a little bit. Turn your body back that way so you're facing right into this big thing. So turn your whole body. Yep, there you go, that's better. Now bring your glove down right here. There you go, just like that. Go ahead and hold the ball right there, pal. Perfect. Just like that, bud. Perfect. Right there. That looks good. Just going to make a minor adjustment on this flash. Good. Nose over here. Right here. And eyes to me, bud. Oh, that's a great one. That looks good. 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 Little smile there. Good. Doing great, pal. That looks good. Okay, turn your nose that way just a little. Eyes here. Give me your tough guy look. Where's that tough guy look? Good. Now just rest your hand right here with the ball. There you go. Perfect. Good, just like that. Hold it like you're going to throw it. Good. Looking right here. Set the ball right down on your glove. Right there. Good. I'm just going to let the flare race into the lens here just a little bit too. Good. Little smile. Doing great, pal. Good. Big grin. Just going to get really low here. Little smile. There you go. I'm going to tickle you next, pal. Tickle. Tickle. Good. Good job, buddy. Thank you. So go ahead and you can stand up for this one. Just stand up tall. Good. Step over this way just a little. Turn this way just a smidge. Good. You are doing so good, bud. Thanks for your patience. Step to me just a little. Step up right here. Stop. Good. Perfect, bud. Good. Just like that. Good. Let me check that out, bud. Okay. One more knee right here. Up close. Now I'm going to turn this off and just do a little available light bounce. Perfect. Scoot just a touch to me, pal. So no flash on this. Just going to use this fill card as a little bounce. Come in for a tight portrait. That's great, bud, right there. Good, good, good. Super right there. Looks good, bud. Hang on. I'm going to dial down the depth of field just a little bit. There we go. Looking right here, pal. Little smile right there. Great, bud. That looks super. Eyes right in the camera. Can you see me in there? Perfect, right there. Okay, last one. I'm coming up tall. You stay right there. Gonna shoot down right into the grass. Good, right there. Where's your smile, bud? Where's that smile? Bonk. Whoa. Uh-oh. Oh, man. Did I get you? Did I get you that time? I got you. Stay right there. Don't move. Good. Right there, pal. Looking right here. Eyes right here, bud. All right. Here comes the tickle. Ow! No way. Good one. All right, bud. Give me 5. Excellent. The great thing with digital photography from when I started shooting film is you have immediate feedback. You can look at that picture and go, oh, that doesn't work. When I learned, you were shooting a roll of E6 film, dropping it off at the lab, picking it up the next day, and by the time you got your film back and you look at your picture and said, oh, that sucks, the shoot's over, the subject's gone, and it's all over. Yeah. Where now you have that feedback of, shoot a lot. It's amazing to me when I see people with digital cameras that they're just still treating it like they're paying for film. I shoot a lot of pictures, and I take a lot of bad pictures, but somewhere in there, I just keep working that subject matter until I get that shot.
I was watching you today work with a couple of models, and the quantity of photographs that you took was really kind of astounding and liberating. But the other thing is, I noticed that you keep looking at your monitor all the time.
The digital technology is amazing, and it was a struggle at first because I was so comfortable shooting transparency film. I knew the system, I knew what a Polaroid, how that information on a Polaroid would translate into film when we were proofing our images. But once you got over that curve and you had that immediate feedback, where you can either look on your camera or shoot straight into your laptop and pull that image up big and look at it, it's phenomenal, especially for clients. It's clients now, they would rarely want to shoot film because at the end of the day, everybody wants to make sure they have their job. Right. And we used to take the film to the lab, and although you felt like, yeah, it's in there, everybody kind of collectively held their breath until everything came back from the lab, and you're like, okay, yeah, there it is. But now there's no mystery. It's in the case of an advertising shoot, I have someone looking at the monitor. Oftentimes we're dropping the graphics in right there. The client's looking at it and is it going to look kind of like this? No, that's it. Do you like it? Because if you don't, tell us now what you don't like and we'll change it. The other thing I see people making a mistake with is depth of field. They don't understand their camera. It's shutter speed, aperture, ISO, what is all this stuff? Well, the basic principles are your f-stop, the smaller the number, the larger the iris is. Basically just think of it as an eye. Your f-stop is your aperture. It's like your eye. When you go into a dark room, your eye opens up to let more light in. Same principle with the camera. You need to open it up to let more light in when it's darker. When it's really bright out, you're going to tend to close that down, and it's going to be a smaller opening, so less light is coming in. Well, here's where this is important. As you close down your aperture, your depth of field increases. That means if you're taking a picture of me and there's a forest in the background, at f/22, I'm going to be in focus, and that forest is going to be in focus with an average lens. If you reverse that and you go ahead and you open up to like f2.8 and you focus on me, I'm going to be in focus, but that depth of field is going to drop off and that background is going to be out of focus.
You want to be able to choose how much of the background is either enhancing the subject or detracting.
Exactly. Is that background, you'll see some of my portraits where I'm doing a wide angle shot. As your lens gets wider, that depth of field becomes more. As you go with a telephoto lens, that depth of field automatically becomes less. So you open up Sports Illustrated and you see a picture of a quarterback back to pass, and there's all this blur of color in the background of the crowd. That's a 400 millimeter f2.8 or f4 lens from really far away where that person is sharp and the background's blown out. That gives you a sense of place. It makes the subject pop off of the background, and it makes you isolate on them. So you've worked the composition in automatically, because what the person can look at is only in that shallow depth of field. As where if you back off and you're shooting a wide shot in that football stadium, that person's going to be in focus, and all of a sudden the crowd and the lights and the stands and all of that, which can equally be a great photograph, but you're using that element of all the background and everything else to help tell the story. Where you get into trouble is when you're not paying attention to your background and your background is competing with your subject matter. So if you go into a window lit situation, an open shade situation, put your camera on aperture priority. Put it on 2.8, f4, whatever the lowest number is, and take pictures up close. Fill the frame with your subject's face and take pictures, get their eyes in focus, and you'll automatically see when you're looking at those images the impact and the difference, because that shallow depth is going to be right here, and even their ears may start to go out of focus, and you're going to have more of a personality come at you through those pictures. Perfect right there. And I'm shooting some horizontal versions now. You always want to cover both horizontal and vertical. You want to try several different framings and allow room for copy when possible. Good, chin down just a little bit more, a little bit more, go, 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 good. Right there, little smile. So Luis, we're f4 at 125. Good. Good, let's do another hand wrap from this pose.
And then
Now you've decided to shoot at f4, Tim. So obviously you're introducing something to the background. I mean, it's not just a blur in the back. So
what I'm trying to do is basically take the background out of focus, but still carry a decent depth of field on her. You get with these lenses that are 2.8 lenses, when you're sharp and everything's on, it's fabulous, but when you're a little bit off, you might as well throw the shot in the garbage. The stock agent is really particular about focus, and it's not uncommon that you're off just a little on a shot and they won't take it. So I'm working with autofocus on the camera, but even sometimes that gets tricked. So I just want enough depth of field that it's not too shallow, and I'm pulling focus probably from about her shoulders to her nose. So with a telephoto lens like this, when you're shooting in close, if you're wide open, this is a 2.8 lens, at 2.8 the background goes very soft, which I like, because what that does is two things. It separates her from the background, and two is eliminates that background from competing with her. Good. So hold still right there, Koya, and what I'm going to do is, go ahead and clasp your hands. Good. I'm going to shoot a range here. Just hold that. Good. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2. So what I did is I just bracketed a range. Hold that right there. That's cute. Good. Hang tight right there. Don't move.
When we were shooting today, what I saw you doing was manipulating light all the time.
I think when I first started taking pictures, it was like anybody else. I've got a 35mm camera and a zoom lens, and I started taking pictures of my family and friends and landscapes, and I fell in love with photography. I didn't have any real understanding of commercial photography, of lighting, of strobes, and through my education at Brooks Institute, and then later working for Dean Collins, who was the master of lighting. Again, it became more. I felt I became more of a picture maker than a picture taker. I think there's two different areas there. I love the process of looking at what I have to work with and putting the elements together, of lighting it, creating the light. Today in the studio we were working in, taking the existing light and manipulating it slightly to get the look that I wanted.
one of the things that I noticed when I was watching you shooting with the models is that a lot of the work was done before you ever showed up with your camera. Before the models ever showed up, you had decided where the shoot was going to take place. You had arranged for all the props to be there. You had arranged for Missy, the stylist, to be there, and I've worked with her before and she's fabulous. You had all of the wardrobe there. All of your guys were there. They all knew what their jobs were, and so it really was kind of a well-oiled machine.
Sure. Production is a huge part of success, and when you have clients that are hiring you, to perform, basically, I mean, you're not much different than a musician that's been contracted to put on a concert. And you got to make sure that all your band equipment is there, your instruments are tuned up, and when it's time to hit that first note, that you're entertaining that crowd, you're putting on a performance. And photography is very similar in that fashion at that level, where clients are expecting, in the case of what we're doing, it was a stock shoot for myself, and I'm ultimately the client that needs to be happy with the end results there. But that that workflow and that preparation comes from doing a lot of advertising work, where having all those things in place, having someone that's in charge of the models and the wardrobe, the makeup, that frees me up to be able to be creative and just be thinking about taking pictures. In most cases, I pre-visualize kind of what I think that shot's going to be. I've worked in that space before. I'm familiar with the model, and I kind of had a pretty good idea of what we ended up getting, as far as pictures. Was kind of what I had in mind. So, that's, part of why everything kind of came together that way. It doesn't always, work that way. Oftentimes I'm showing up at a location that I have never seen before, working with a person I've never met before, and you have to get into a situation and light in, a short window of time and, make it happen. But that's the great thing about photography, is every day, every situation is different, and it's, problem solving, and that's one of the things I love about being a photographer.
If we were to take this back, simply just take it back a level for somebody that may want their photos to be better, and they're serious about their hobby, they're serious about wanting to be a better photographer, but they don't necessarily want to sell something, they don't necessarily want to spend 40 hours a week or 60 or 80 hours a week being a professional photographer. There's still some lessons from watching the footage of the stock photography shoot that I think that these guys can take away from it. And one of them is what you were talking about before, pre-visualizing. It's a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, it's a little bit like scouting.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I know with, say corporate portrait, I could go into an environment and I may have 15 or 20 minutes to look at the space I'm going to work in, and I may use existing lighting or have to augment that lighting, but I know that I may have two different setups, and I'm going to put the person I'm photographing over here, I'm going to light them this way, bam, I've got that, then I'm going to move them over here and get that, because you have a limited window of time. I think in any of those situations, whether it's a wedding, whether it's just your personal work you're shooting at your house, the more you do it, the more you get familiar with what those results are. And you may take a great picture of your kid in your living room, and then have another opportunity where someone's coming to visit and you go, hey, that worked out great last time, and I know that that kind of light coming through this window yields this kind of result. And then you learn from that, and then that may translate into a location shoot that you do 2 years from now. But it's just years and years of doing it. It's kind of like a muscle that you work out on a regular basis, and it's in good shape. And photography is very much the same way. And if you don't go out there and practice, and you don't use those muscles and your eyes seeing and feeling the light, knowing what's going on, then you kind of get out of practice.
You were talking about before, looking for a composition, looking for something to frame your subject, especially if you're looking for a portrait.
Sure. Well, in a situation like this where you come out and, we've talked about in the commercial world where I control the elements typically. I'm selecting the location, I'm selecting the time of day, I'm selecting the models, I'm lighting it. So, the ability to remove, as much guesswork as possible, ensure me the results that I want to get, allows me to, perform on the spot, which is, why people are typically hiring me. In a situation like today, it's a little bit windy, you're dealing with wildlife, you may or may, not find something to photograph, and it's far more of a, reactive, environment to, you can come at a certain time of day when the light's going to be good. Fortunately, we've got a clear day, but, everything else, a certain amount of it is, up to luck.
Right.
But you do want to, have a good range of lenses to choose from, especially shooting wildlife in a situation like this, because you're not going to get, up close to the animals. And the people out there that, that are shooting wildlife day in and day out, that's why they're getting those amazing shots. They may go to one location, 30 times to get that one image that you look at in a magazine and go, wow, how'd they get that shot? And it seems, so simple, but, they are, oftentimes building blinds, they understand the habitats of the animals, maybe a certain species that comes back to the same spot every year, and it's just, patience and persistence is a lot of it, and you can't expect to show up, one day and, get amazing shots. You may get lucky, but, it's, try to prepare as best as you can and go out, and it's kind of like hunting. Sometimes you get a good one, and sometimes you get nothing. People look at the work I do all the time as a, commercial photographer, and they say, oh, well, that's great. You have assistants and you got a budget for, makeup and wardrobe and professional models and locations. And yeah, I do in that case, but also I do a lot of personal work that I try to do as inexpensively as I can. There's, a difference between doing it at a level where it's acceptable and it's going to help you elevate your portfolio and market to the level you want. But, there's also jobs that, you could go out and do really inexpensively with minimal equipment and get great shots. It's more about the thought process behind the photo and thinking it through. So, a lot of times I hear that from people, well, that's great for you, but that's not going to work for me. But the thing is, if you do want to elevate your photography and make it a profit center, you're going to have to figure out at what level you want to function on. And that could be high-end production work. And if you want to get that kind of work, you have to produce that kind of work. So, you have to spend the money up front, and you have to build a book or a portfolio that shows that you can produce that kind of, work.
Yeah.
With nature photographers, you can do things inexpensively, but you got to put in the time.
This is a good example of that. We were hoping we'd be able to sneak one in here because obviously we're producing a video, and we were thinking, well, it's San Diego, the weather never changes, it's perfect. And so here we are on a windy day and looking for ducks to fly in, and we're hoping.
It's been overcast and we got blue sky, but we got the wind. So, that's part of it. And, the people that even, want to get into nature photography, I have a lot of friends that make a living doing that. They're traveling to destinations, national parks. They're going out and they're shooting day after day after day.
Right.
The Tom Mangelsons, the Franz Lontings of the world, those guys are out there shooting all the time in amazing locations, and they're just paying their dues. And a lot of people say, wow, what a lucky shot. Well, yeah, it's part luck, but you got to be there, you got to be prepared, you have to have the right equipment, and you got to get the shot. Whenever possible, I try to work with a professional makeup stylist and wardrobe stylist. It's not inexpensive to have those people on your shoot, but when you're working, in a commercial situation, it's just a necessity that you have people there that know the details, have that covered, and it frees me up to worry about taking the picture, working on the lighting, and the creative side of things versus what the wardrobe and the hair is looking like.
But it's really kind of a good lesson for anybody who's shooting their family, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot harder, at home. I mean, I've got a 6-year-old son, and I shoot pictures of him all the time, and I'm not running around with powder, patting him down. But if you're going to do any sort of a, formal, image that you're trying to market to the creative community, advertising agencies, creative directors are going to know the attention to detail that they're going to see in a picture like this versus, someone that just kind of grabbed a friend and, threw a photo shoot together. When people get into photography, they're going to buy an SLR. They go into the camera store and they look at all the lenses. I mean, there's tons of them. It's overwhelming. What do I really need here? So I think if we just kind of step through the different focal lengths and what the differences are, it'll help people understand better what the effect that lens is. If it's a specialty lens or if it's a a zoom lens, what does that mean? And what kind of work do you want to do with the camera is going to dictate what sort of lens you should purchase. So as far as millimeter focal length, a 14 millimeter lens is going to be a wide angle lens. The smaller the number, the wider the lens is going to be. So a 14 is a wide angle lens, and 200, 300, 500, those are all telephoto lenses.
Right.
So a wide lens you're going to want if you're doing, like an extreme wide, like a 14, if you're doing interiors, you're doing like wide landscapes, rock climbing maybe if you're, want to kind of pick up the rocks that you're on plus the landscape, and a telephoto lens on the other spectrum is going to be for sports, action, where wildlife, where you need to be far away from a subject matter because you can't get close to it, and shoot at a distance and be able to fill the frame with that subject. So a normal lens on a 35 millimeter camera is considered a 50 millimeter lens. That's going to be kind of your standard run-of-the-mill,
That's what our eyes see.
Right, portrait lens. All the camera manufacturers manufacture zoom lenses, which basically are going to have multiple focal lengths. They're basically going to go from 28 to 70 or 70 to 200. And that's what I would suggest for people that are getting into photography initially, is get some sort of a mid-range, zoom lens, that takes you from like 28 to 200. I mean, that's going to cover you for the majority of the stuff that you're going to do. It's only one lens that you have to carry, and it's going to be able to, satisfy a variety of things.
Okay.
Because the other thing I see is that people, that have the money to spend will go overbuy camera equipment. They'll say, oh, I need a wide angle, I need a mid-range, I need a telephoto, and all of a sudden they have, 30 pounds of gear that they need to take out everywhere they go. And next thing you know, they're like, I don't even want to carry this stuff, and they've got their point and shoot back in their camera, and they're back to where they started.
Yeah, well, that's great, but the whole deal is that I want to cover everything. I want to cover all of the focal distances, but I want really good quality lenses, but I want them to be light.
Well, I mean, certainly, these lenses are a very good option if you want to have multiple lenses and you want to, do it inexpensively. It's not inexpensive, but more inexpensively than buying
Sure.
high-end professional lenses.
Right.
They're lighter weight. You're not paying for necessarily the highest end optics or something that's really heavy duty. That's going to take the abuse that someone like myself puts on a camera by using it every day.
Let's talk a little bit about wide angle, because there's a couple of things that I think we really have to cover. Let's start it down here at this end. This is a beautiful lens that Tamron makes. Yeah. It's a 14 millimeter 2.8 lens. It's a prime lens, so which means there's no zoom.
Yeah, this is a really nice lens, and the thing that is important if you are shopping for a wide angle lens, like a 14, is there is this type of lens, or there is a fisheye, which is actually going to give you a circle. And I've seen people that have gone out thinking they were buying a wide lens that was going to fill the frame, and they ended up with a fisheye, and you get this circle, and it's kind of like a one-trick pony. It's kind of cool to use every once in a while, but it's certainly not for everything.
Exactly right. And now, I don't want to get in hot water with Tamron, but I just want to make sure that our viewers understand, this is an $1,100 lens. Mm-hmm. This is a big investment for some people. I mean, that can be some serious cash. Now, if you're a Nikon shooter and you've got a 1.5 crop factor, what does that mean? That means that we're kind of using only the heart of the glass, doesn't it?
Right. So a 14 millimeter lens is not going to be a true 14 on a 1-to-1 ratio, like with a film camera or with a bigger chip camera. And most of the prosumer cameras or the mid-range cameras, what that means is that the chip size is not actually the same as what the film size used to be with the 35 camera.
Right.
So there is a compression factor. So a 15 millimeter lens might become like a 70 millimeter lens. A 14 millimeter lens may become like
21.
A 28.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see through the lens. You're going to get two different frames if you put this on a full frame chip camera or one that has a compression factor.
But just to be clear, if you put that on a full frame, if this actually had a Canon mount and you put it on a full frame Canon body, you would be seeing all the way out to the physical edge of that lens.
Correct.
And so you're paying for a lot of engineering, and most of that engineering is out there at the edge.
You're paying for that.
You look at that and say, well, that's kind of too bad. Well, kind of, but on the other hand, you've got this kind of a lens, which is 17 to 35.
Right. The reason why some people are buying wider lenses, super wide lenses for cameras that have smaller chips, is that this 14 may become like a 20 mil, and that's the widest that you're going to get, because if you buy a 20 mil, then it becomes
30.
A 30. So, sometimes you have to spend that extra money to get, that wide angle look. If you're doing, interiors, a lot of people are doing, QuickTime VR,
right.
Work where they need a really wide lens to see from the floor to the ceiling for, that kind of a look. And the thing you got to really watch with a lens like this is the front glass, because if you scratch it,
You're done.
it's done, and it's, that's the point of no return.
If you don't quite have that kind of cash, we've got this little guy, which is a zoom lens. Now this is a 17 to 35.
Yeah, that's a really nice, wide zoom. A lot of people always ask, like, what's this thing on the end of your camera for? You've got the lens shade out there, and this is to keep the sun from coming into your lens when you're shooting. And a lot of people don't realize, but that sun flaring into your lens really can, knock down your image quality and your contrast. So I see people all the time that have lens shades but don't use them. Just get in the habit of popping it on there and using it, because it really is going to make a difference. When you get into certain lighting situations to keep the sun out of the front element of the lens. This is the 70 to 300, which I haven't ever had a lens like this, but I think that this is exactly the kind of lens I would recommend for someone that's just trying to get into photography. And it's lightweight. You're going to have 70 mil, which is going to be kind of a decent portrait lens, and then to a 300, which for this size lens, when we were shooting outdoors with the equipment I use for professional sports, you have a huge piece of glass for a 300 fixed lens. That's very expensive. Obviously the optics and the technology and the autofocus and image stabilization is all part of spending the money for those big telephoto lenses. But for the average person that wants to go out and shoot a little wildlife, maybe some flowers, this has a macro setting on it, which is a really nice feature. Your kids sporting events, some portraits around the house, I mean, this is a really nice way to go.
Terrific, and just a couple $100 for something like that. Now maybe you could talk about primes versus zoom lenses, because I know years ago they used to say that you could really tell the difference in terms of the image quality, the crispness and the sharpness if you're shooting primes or if you're versus someone who's shooting with a zoom lens.
So a prime, you have two different things. A prime lens is going to be a fixed focal length lens. So this is a 90 millimeter and that's it. It doesn't zoom, you get 90 millimeter, and it has a macro setting, which means you can get really close in if you want to do shots of insects, shots of flowers. This is the way to go. You're going to be able to get in a lot closer than you are with another type of lens. I have a 100 millimeter macro lens, and I use it on a regular basis for both portraits and for things I need to get close up on. Prime lenses typically are going to be a little more expensive, and they're going to be a little sharper. Again, for introductory photography, people that are amateurs, you're never going to see the difference between the results of an image that's shot with a prime or with a zoom lens. So with the zoom lens, in this case, this is a 90. This has a 90 in it because it goes from 70 to 300. So you're going to get the ability to zoom out and in and cover a wider range of subject matters. Right. And for most people, having a lens like this in your pocket is going to allow you a lot more flexibility to work with one lens and get a variety of shots.
Okay, so last but not least, what we want to do is talk about that big thing on the end.
Yeah, this lens actually isn't quite as big as it looks here because you have a lens shade on it, right, to keep the sun out of the front element, which is really important. Moderately, heavy compared to other lenses, but this is a decent piece of glass. It's a 200 to 500 millimeter lens, and it's a 5 to 6.3 aperture. Yep. So what that means, as you start to extend the focal length up to 500, you're changing your aperture. It's a variable aperture, so it's going to change and let a little bit more light in at the f4 end and less light in at 5.6 when you zoom in.
Right, and so this is, and really what we're talking about is the minimum aperture. So when you're reading one of these boxes and it says f5 to f6.3, means that f5 is the minimum aperture at the wide end, 6.3 is the minimum aperture at the extended end.
Right, and when you start to get into telephoto lenses that you see, photographers at the Super Bowl and high-end nature photographers shooting with, those lenses are going to be a lot bigger because those are typically like f2.8 lenses or f4 lenses that are going to let more light in, so they're bigger, and the element is bigger because they're faster or they're letting more light in.
Right. But the one thing about this that is really important is people might look at it and they say, well, gee, if I'm going to buy such a big lens, maybe I should spend an extra $1,000 and buy a 2.8 lens or an f4 lens. Maybe you should, but remember that this thing is going to weigh a lot less. Yeah, and carrying these things around can really be, I think Tamara's done just an incredible job of giving you something that's a high-end piece of photographic gear. It's about $1,000 or less, and it isn't overwhelming to carry. You can put it on your tripod and you can carry it around, for a couple hours, and it's not gonna break your back.
Yeah, and you got to think about when you're buying this stuff, what do you want to use it for? And most people want to use it for travel, so how much gear, when you're at the camera store and you're buying this stuff, think about really how you're going to use it, and how much gear do you want to have around your neck when you're walking around on vacation or at your kid's soccer game. A lot of people, when they look at telephoto lenses, they wonder why all of a sudden when you go from a f4 or an f5.6 lens and you jump to that 2.8, the price range goes up through the roof. And what that's allowing you to do is shoot faster and have a shallower depth of field. This is a image stabilization technology lens, so when you do move around a little bit, it's a little more forgiving than a traditional lens. The longer that lens gets, the more movement you're going to get as you move that barrel around. You're shooting with a 200 to 500 millimeter zoom there, and when you're zoomed out to 500 and you start moving that just a little bit, you're picking up a lot of motion. Yeah. So there's having your tripod and having that thing locked down becomes really key in those situations, because just the slightest bit of movement, even at a fast shutter speed, is going to get you soft in your image.
Yeah. And that's what you were talking about here. This is a lens that our friends at Tamron were kind enough to lend to us for this shoot, and it's not a VR lens or an IS lens. Obviously, it's not going to gather as much light, but I can probably carry it around for a little longer than something that's an f2. I also have a little bit longer reach than you do without an extender.
Sure, absolutely. And every lens is going to have a plus and a minus to it. And when you're getting started, you don't have to go out and buy the most expensive lenses. I started off with a manual, very basic camera with a 70 to 200 zoom lens that was a 4 to 5.6. It was a very basic lens, but it got me started, and started to see things. And then all of a sudden, when you start building your portfolio and you need to have better equipment, then you can go plop that money down. And we had talked earlier about having the right equipment for the job, and a lens like this, a setup like this, is not inexpensive. But if you're going to try to do wildlife photography or sports photography on a professional level, making the investment in good equipment is going to allow you to get those shots. You're not going to be able to go out with a little point and shoot, pocket camera and, try to break into doing wildlife photography. You have to kind of make a commitment and a, investment at a certain point to get good equipment in order to get the shots, if that's what you want to try to do. I remember a great assignment when I was going to Brooks Institute, and it was shoot 20 strangers. And you had to go up to 20 people that you didn't know, and you had to take their picture, and it all had to be framed in a similar way. I remember the favorite one that someone in my class did was they photographed people through their car windows. And they approached him in the parking lot at the grocery store and said, hey, I'm doing this assignment, I'm a photo student, may I take a picture? But the car windows framed everybody, and it was interesting to see a little piece of the car, which told you a little bit of the story about, who they were, and then, the picture of them framed within that window. So I think that's, a good assignment is, go out, and find 20 people that you don't know and take a picture of them, but do something that you like. I think putting yourself into your photography is a key thing that takes a long time for photographers to do. If you like, baseball, then, go to your kid's baseball game and shoot 20, portraits of kids. If you like cooking, go to 20 restaurants and take a picture of, the waiter, or, whatever it is, your personal passion, your personal interest, It could be pregnant moms or redheads or kids with freckles. Pick a body of work, one subject matter, shoot it one way, framed in a similar fashion, and build that body of work. Because what you're going to end up doing is getting some consistency of a story, which goes beyond just a single frame. And I think that's when photography really starts to become exciting, is when you see not just one image, but what can I do over time. Today I'm dad and happen to be a professional photographer, but I'm shooting my son Lucas's t-ball game. I don't bring a lot of equipment, just the basic telephoto 70 to 200 type lens. Today I'm shooting with a 70 to 300 Tamron lens on the Nikon, and I just kind of mix it up and have fun, shoot some fast shutter speed stuff, some slow shutter speed stuff, and we'll just try a few things and see what happens. That's kind of part of the fun of it. You don't know what you're going to get.
So what do you see when you're looking out at this field?
Well, we always play at the same field this time of day on a day game. It's about 5 o'clock, so the sun's getting low and backlit. So what I'm probably going to do is compensate to open up a little bit from what the meter reading is telling me. That way, with these kids with the hats on, you're going to get a little light on their face, and the backlight's going to blow out just a little bit. So, I typically put the camera oftentimes in aperture priority, open the camera wide open, and then that way the background's as blown out as possible. Go with the longest focal length I have, and then the kids will just snap off the background.
So when you're shooting these action shots, Tim, are you going to be looking mostly at the batter's box or someplace else?
I kind of move around.
Okay.
I shoot the kids at the tee hitting. I'll get them running from third to home. I just kind of move around and try to mix it up a little bit.
I know that this is a t-ball game, but I've got to think that there are things that you've learned from shooting professional baseball games that you're bringing to this.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But also what I learned is a lot from shooting t-ball that I take to professional games, because this is a really good way to practice things that otherwise in a major league situation you don't really have the luxury of fooling around with, so to speak. You gotta if you're shooting for a client, you don't have the opportunity to kind of test when you're there to get as many good shots as you want. Well, here I can fool around with shutter speeds, different lenses, and a little bit different angles, and kind of see what I get, which does translate to shooting a lot of different things. So I'll move around the field. The nice thing is with the t-ball, you can go out on the field and kind of move around a little more loosely. In a professional environment, especially in Major League Baseball, you're stuck to the photo well and you can't really leave that area. So I'm just moving over down the first base line to get the kids running towards the bag here. Good shot if the first baseman's reaching out for the ball if you shoot a horizontal. Nice hustle, Jared. Nice try, bud. So typically with sports, if I was shooting a professional baseball game, I'd probably be working with 300 millimeter, 400, 600 millimeter lenses. You're stuck in the photo well, and you have to, get out to the players. Where here you have a little more of a luxury of moving in and out, and changing up the focal length by the distance you get to the subject matter, where you just don't have that in a professional situation.
Right.
Sometimes when the kids are sitting on the bench, I'll come in and do tight detail shots of faces, try to capture the storyline, just not the action, but the whole game. Hey, Luke.
Hey, all right.
Hey, buddy. I'm just trying to get back from them just a little bit to blow the fence out of focus as much as possible. These first two batters are lefties, so really should move to the other side to get a face shot. Nice running, Lucas. Well, there's nice low light in the afternoon here. Sun's coming down. You got nice rim light if the kids are backlit. And then if you shoot from the other side at them, you have nice warm light coming in at them. So just nice late in the day lighting to shoot with. Just because of the backlight, I'm opening up about a third to a half stop when they're fully backlit, just to get a little more light on their faces. So the meter's getting fooled just a little bit, but can't really adjust for the blacks because you'll just blow out the highlights. And I just have the camera on autopilot as far as the metering, with a slight compensation when I'm shooting direct into the sun.
Excellent, Jeffrey.
I have the camera set on aperture priority, and basically letting the camera pick the fastest shutter speed for me. I want to shoot wide open to blow the background out as much as possible. So pretty much just trying to get the fastest shutter speed I can for most of these. Every once in a while I'll do the opposite, and I'll go to like a 15th or a 30th of a second to get some blurry action of the kids running. You don't want to slow the shutter speed down with the kids running straight at you, because you won't get a good blur on it. It'll blur out too much. But if you go side to side, so if they're running from third base to home, and slow the shutter speed down, you can pan with that action and get a little motion in their feet in the background. The other thing you can get here from this shot down the baseline is use the actual baseline as kind of a leading line into the shot. So on some of the shots I'll shoot horizontal, and I'll use this baseline as a graphic to take your eye into the frame. The kids are running at you, so it's a nice way to do the composition. The biggest thing I see with other people that are amateur photographers shooting sports is that they try to just shoot one or two frames, like on the swing. I just hold the motor drive down and go for it. Especially in baseball, the point of contact is really hard to judge, so even with a camera with a high buffer, you have to just let the motor drive crank.